All right, let's go. Number 10. The Cave of Swallows, Mexico. In 1966, Mexican speleologists exploring the remote Sierra Gorda mountains of San Luis Potosí stumbled across a hole in the ground that defied comprehension. When they lowered a light into it, the beam disappeared before it reached the bottom. What they had found was a vertical shaft so vast that a 40-story building could stand inside it without touching the ceiling. And nobody had any idea what lay beneath. The Sótano de las Golondrinas, named for the millions of swifts and parakeets that roost along its walls, is not merely a large pit. It is a world unto itself. The shaft opens to a diameter of roughly 135 by 160 meters at its widest point, and drops approximately 376 meters to a chamber floor that sits in permanent twilight. For decades after its discovery, reaching that floor required extraordinary technical skill and considerable courage. What makes this passage genuinely unresolved is not the shaft itself, which was first fully descended by free rappel in 1994, but what lies beneath it. Water enters the cave from sources that have never been identified, pools on the chamber floor, and then vanishes into the rock through passages too narrow for any human body to follow. Where that water goes, nobody knows. Survey teams have mapped the visible chamber in considerable detail, but the hydrological system feeding it remains entirely cryptic. The cave breathes. Air moves through it from somewhere below, carrying moisture and the cool signature of passages that extend far beyond anything a person can enter. Geologists working in the region believe the system connects to a broader subterranean network, but every attempt to find a secondary entrance has failed. We can drop a rope to the floor. What we cannot do is follow the water that vanishes into the rock below it. Number 9. Hang Son Doong, Vietnam. In 1991, a farmer named Ho Con was sheltering from a storm in the jungle of Quang Binh Province, Vietnam, when the ground opened beneath his feet into a roaring darkness. Wind blasted upward from somewhere below. The sound was deafening. He fled, and then spent the next 17 years unable to find the place again. When Ho Con finally relocated the entrance in 2008 and guided a team from the British Cave Research Association inside in 2009, survey leader Howard Limbert and his colleagues discovered the largest cave passage on Earth by volume. The main corridor runs approximately 5 kilometers in length, reaches heights of 200 meters, and stretches 150 meters wide. It contains its own weather system. Clouds form inside it. A jungle grows on the cave floor, sustained by light filtering through ceiling collapses called dolines. Hang Son Doong has been open to guided tourists since 2013, which creates a strange contradiction. The most immense cave passage ever recorded is a commercial destination, and yet it has no known end. At one terminus, a massive calcite barrier known as the Great Wall of Vietnam rises from the cave floor to block further progress. Beyond it, passage continues into unmapped territory that no survey team has fully entered. The cave's internal river is the other unresolved thread. It flows through the passage, disappears into a boulder choke at one end, and reemerges kilometers away at a surface spring in the jungle. The route it takes between those 2 points has never been observed by any human being. That intervening passage exists in total darkness, in total silence, and in total ignorance of the fact that we are looking for it. The largest cave on Earth has been open to tourists since 2013, so why can't we reach the end of it? Number 8. The Majlis Al Jinn Cave, Oman. In 1983, American geologist Don Davidson Jr. was studying satellite imagery of the Selma Plateau in Oman's Al Hajar Mountains when he noticed 3 unusual circular depressions in the limestone, each roughly the size of a football field. They were not craters. They were skylights, openings in the ceiling of a vast underground chamber that no surface map had ever acknowledged existed. Local communities across the Al Hajar region had avoided the plateau for generations, and the name they gave this place reflects that unease. Majlis al Jinn translates as meeting place of the jinn, The supernatural beings of Islamic tradition. The plateau was considered forbidden ground. When Davidson and his colleagues, including Cheryl Jones and Jawad Al-Farsi, made the first recorded descent through one of the skylights that same year, they found a chamber 310 meters long, 225 meters wide, and 120 meters high, one of the largest cave chambers in the world by surface area. What they did not find was any way out. The 3 skylights are the only known entrances. There is no ground-level passage, no corridor leading away from the chamber, no door in any of its walls that a person could follow. Water drains through the floor, through fissures too small for human passage, and where it goes has never been established. Decades of investigation have not changed that picture. The chamber sits at approximately 1,380 meters of elevation in one of the most geologically active limestone regions on the Arabian Peninsula, and the drainage beneath it should, by rights, connect to something. Karst hydrology does not produce sealed rooms. There is a system below the Majlis al-Jinn floor, feeding it and draining it, that has simply never been found. The chamber was discovered from space. What lies beneath it has defeated everyone who has tried to find out. Number 7. The Tam Luang Cave System, Thailand. In June 2018, 12 boys and their football coach entered Tam Luang Cave in the Doi Nang Non mountain range of Chiang Rai Province, Thailand, and did not come out for 17 days. The rescue that followed gripped the world. What the world did not learn, in all the coverage of that operation, was that the cave they were trapped in had never been fully mapped, and still has not been. Tam Luang, which translates as Great Cave, stretches for approximately 10.3 kilometers of known passage, making it one of the longest cave systems in Thailand. The Thai Cave Conservation Division and the Cave Research Association of Thailand had been working to survey it since the 1980s, but the cave resists investigation. It floods seasonally and completely. Passages that are accessible during the dry season become entirely inundated for months, swallowing any route a surveyor might otherwise follow. The rescue operation of 2018 explored more of Tam Luang under emergency conditions than any deliberate scientific expedition had managed before it. The British cave divers who led the rescue, including Richard Stanton and John Valanthan, navigated flooded passages in near-zero visibility to reach the boys in Chamber 9. Beyond that chamber, they glimpsed passages continuing into the mountain that disappeared into water-filled tunnels, too dangerous and too unexplored to follow. Local tradition in the region holds that the cave system connects beneath the mountains all the way to Shan State in Myanmar, a belief that has circulated for generations. No geological survey has confirmed it, and none has ruled it out. The passages beyond Chamber 9 remain uncharted. The hydrology feeding the cave's seasonal floods remains only partially understood, and the mountain keeps its interior to itself. What lies beyond where those boys sheltered has still never been seen by anyone who went looking for it. Number 6. The Lechugila Cave System, New Mexico. Over the late May weekend of 1986, a group of cavers in Carlsbad Caverns National Park began digging through rubble at the bottom of a small, unremarkable pit. The pit was called Lechugila Cave, and it had been known for decades as a modest dead end. But air was moving through the rubble, cold and persistent, and that meant something much larger was behind it. After 3 days of excavation, the team, including Richard Bridges and other members of the Lechugila Cave Project, broke through into a passage that went on for days. What they had opened was the deepest limestone cave in the United States. Over the next 4 decades of systematic survey, teams working under strict National Park Service permits mapped over 242 kilometers of passage and descended to a confirmed depth of 489 meters. New passages are still being discovered today. The cave holds formations found nowhere else on Earth: cave pearls, moon milk deposits, and subaqueous helictites that grow in shapes that seem to violate the rules of geology. The biological discoveries are where Lechugila becomes genuinely extraordinary. In the 1990s, microbiologists working inside the cave identified bacterial communities that had been isolated from the surface world long enough to evolve in complete independence. These organisms had never been exposed to sunlight, to surface soil, or to the atmospheric conditions that shaped every other known ecosystem on Earth. NASA subsequently began studying the cave as one of the closest accessible analogs for life that might exist on other planets. Access to Lechuguilla is among the most tightly controlled of any cave in the world. Only permitted scientific and survey teams may enter, and they undergo decontamination procedures designed to prevent surface organisms from contaminating what is inside. The reason for that caution is the reason the cave belongs on this list. Somewhere in its unexplored passages, in rooms that no human has yet entered, there may be living things that science has never described. After nearly 4 decades and 242 kilometers of mapping, survey teams still regularly break into rooms no human has ever entered. The cave is not finished with them yet. Number 5. The Sistema Sac Acton, Mexico. In January 2018, a team of underwater archaeologists and divers working for the Gran Acuífero Maya project made an announcement that rewrote the geological record of the Yucatan Peninsula. 2 cave systems that had been mapped separately for years were, in fact, a single continuous labyrinth. The combined system, known as Sistema Sac Acton, stretched for over 347 kilometers of mapped underwater passage, making it the longest known underwater cave system on Earth. The project was led by underwater archaeologist Guillermo de Anda, in partnership with Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. The passages they were connecting had been explored by divers for decades, but the sheer scale of the system, flooded entirely by groundwater filtered through millennia of limestone, had made complete mapping nearly impossible. The Yucatan has no surface rivers. Its water moves underground through this lightless subterranean network before emerging at coastal springs or cenotes open to the surface. What the mapping revealed was not only geological, but archaeological. Inside the passages of Sac Acton, divers found the skeletal remains of human beings at least 10,000 years old, along with the bones of Gomphotheres, an extinct relative of the elephant that died out at the end of the Pleistocene. These remains had rested in abyssal stillness, untouched, because the passages holding them had been underwater since the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose. Diving these passages is not straightforward exploration. The system contains a halocline, a sharp boundary layer where freshwater meets saltwater that creates a visual distortion so severe that divers report losing all sense of which direction is up. Navigating beyond the halocline into passages that have not been entered since the Pleistocene means moving through a suffocating disorientation where the geometry of the world no longer behaves as expected. Beneath the resort beaches of Quintana Roo runs a drowned labyrinth containing the bones of extinct animals, and the oldest human remains in the Americas. How much of it will we ever actually see? Number 4. The Krubera Cave, Georgia. In the summer of 2004, Ukrainian explorer Alexander Klimchuk led a team of speleologists into the Arabika Massif in the western Caucasus Mountains of Abkhazia in the Republic of Georgia, with a specific intention. They were going to go deeper underground than any human being in recorded history. By the time they turned back, they had come closer than anyone before them, but they had not reached the bottom. Krubera Cave, also known as Voronezh Cave, had been known to Soviet speleologists since the 1960s, but the full scale of its descent was not appreciated until systematic exploration began in the 1980s under Klimchuk and the Ukrainian Speleological Association. The cave drops through a series of pitches, traverses, and flooded sections called sumps, requiring expeditions that typically last 3 to 4 weeks and establish multiple underground camps at increasing depths. In 2012, Ukrainian caver Gennady Samokin set the current depth record of 2,197 meters, deeper than any other known cave on Earth. At that depth, Samokin reached a sump, a flooded passage where the cave continues below a body of water. He could not pass it. The combination of extreme depth, water pressure, and total remoteness from the surface makes any attempt to dive that terminal sump one of the most dangerous undertakings in the history of exploration. Cave diving at 2,197 meters below the surface. Days of travel from the nearest exit, with no rescue possible if anything goes wrong, represents a category of risk that has so far prevented any human from finding out what lies beyond. Some geological modeling of the Arabica Massif suggests the cave system may extend to depths of over 5,000 meters, though that figure remains a projection rather than a confirmed finding. What is certain is that the cave does not end at Samakin's record. It continues. The rock below that terminal sump conceals a passage that has existed for millions of years, in total darkness, without a name and without a visitor. 2 kilometers below the surface of the Earth, there is a body of water in a crack in the rock. Beyond it, the cave almost certainly continues. No one has ever been there. Number 3. The Well of Barhout, Yemen. In the Al-Mahra Governorate of Eastern Yemen, there is a circular hole in the desert that local communities have avoided for centuries. They call it Bir Barhout, the Well of Barhout, and in ancient Islamic tradition, it has been described as a prison for evil spirits, a place where the condemned are held beneath the earth. In October 2021, a team from the Omani Caves exploration team, led by Mohammed Al-Kindi, became the first people in recorded history to descend into it. What they reported when they came back up has not resolved anything. The surface opening measures approximately 30 meters across, modest by the standards of the world's great pits. But the shaft widens as it descends, opening into a chamber larger than the entrance suggests, and the team's equipment was not sufficient to reach the bottom or map the interior. Their depth estimate exceeded 100 meters, but that figure is an approximation, not a survey measurement. The true depth of the Well of Barhout remains unknown. What the team reported from inside was harder to categorize. The temperature rose sharply below the surface. A powerful, unidentified odor pervaded the chamber, described variously as sulfurous and organic. Large numbers of dead birds lay on accessible ledges and floor sections. The combination of heat, strange gases, and bird mortality suggests a chemical or geological process occurring somewhere below, but no formal scientific analysis of the air or rock has been conducted. The reason no formal scientific expedition has followed the 2021 descent is straightforward and sobering. Yemen has been in the grip of a civil war since 2015. The Al-Mahra region, while relatively less affected than other parts of the country, remains inaccessible to international research teams. The necessary permits, logistics, and safety infrastructure for a proper geological and atmospheric survey of the Well of Barhout cannot currently be assembled. The hole sits in the desert and waits. A pit feared for 1,000 years, descended once by a small team with limited equipment, and studied by no one since. What exactly is at the bottom of it? Number 2. The Hellhole Cave, West Virginia. In the mountains of Pendleton County, West Virginia, near the small community of Riverton, there is a cave whose informal name was earned honestly. Hellhole has been known to local communities since at least the 1930s, and serious speleological work by the National Speleological Society began in the 1950s and 1960s. In the decades since, the cave has killed people, swallowed equipment, defeated specialist teams, and refused, despite nearly a century of effort, to yield its full extent to anyone who has entered it. The cave descends through a 50-meter entrance pit into a network of passages, boulder chokes, waterfalls, and chambers that shift character with the seasons. Flash flooding can fill sections that were passable hours earlier. Rockfalls occur without warning in sections that appeared stable on previous visits. The NSS has documented it as one of the most consistently dangerous caves in the eastern United States. A distinction not earned by any single dramatic incident, but by the accumulating weight of rescues, injuries, and fatalities across decades of attempted exploration. What makes Hellhole categorically different from a merely dangerous cave is a hydrological fact that cannot be argued with. Water enters the cave and resurges at a spring approximately 3 kilometers away on the surface. That means a passage connecting the cave's interior to that resurgence point exists. It is not theoretical. It is not speculative. Water proves it every single day. That passage is approximately 3 kilometers long. It has existed for geological ages. And in the entire history of human exploration of this cave, not one person has ever been inside it. The passage cannot be safely reached from the known sections of the cave. It may be underwater for portions of its length. It may pass through boulder chokes too tight for a human body. It may require conditions, equipment, or techniques that have not yet been brought to bear on it. None of those explanations change the fundamental reality. The passage exists. We know it exists. Water proves it every day. It is 3 kilometers long, and in nearly a century of trying, not one human being has seen it. Number 1. The Movile Cave, Romania. In 1986, construction workers drilling near the Black Sea coast town of Mangalia in Constanța County, Romania, broke through a thin crust of limestone and opened something that should not have been there. The air that escaped smelled of sulfur and rot. It was not the air of any environment connected to the surface world. When Romanian biologist Cristian Lascu was lowered inside to investigate, he found a cave that had been sealed from the outside for an estimated 5.5 million years, confirmed by isotope analysis of the water and rock, and inside it, an ecosystem that operated by entirely different rules from anything on the surface of the Earth. There is no photosynthesis in Movile Cave. No sunlight has ever penetrated it. The base of its food chain is not a plant. It is a community of sulfur-oxidizing bacteria that extract energy from the chemical reactions occurring in the cave's warm, toxic water, a process called chemosynthesis. Every organism living in Movile Cave depends, ultimately, on those bacteria, and every one of those organisms has been isolated from the rest of life on Earth for longer than our species has existed. To date, scientists have identified 33 endemic species inside the cave, creatures found nowhere else on Earth: blind spiders, depigmented scorpions, colorless water scorpions, and leeches evolved to hunt in permanent primordial darkness. Access to Movile is among the most restricted of any location on Earth. A handful of scientists per year are permitted to enter, and each must undergo strict decontamination before and after. The reason is not only the atmosphere inside, where carbon dioxide concentrations reach between 2 and 3.5%, and hydrogen sulfide levels approach 2%, both lethal without breathing apparatus, but what human entry would do to the cave. Surface bacteria introduced into Movile's ecosystem could collapse it. The organisms living there have no immunity, no evolutionary preparation for contact with the outside biological world. To go further into the cave's unmapped passages, beyond where the toxic atmosphere and flooded sections currently prevent human access, would be to carry that contamination deeper into a world that has survived 5.5 million years, precisely because nothing from the surface ever reached it. NASA has studied Movile Cave as one of the most precise analogs available on Earth for life that might exist on other planets, where no sunlight reaches and chemistry replaces photosynthesis as the engine of biology. The organisms inside it are proof that life does not require the conditions we have always assumed it requires. They are also proof that the unknown is not always somewhere distant. Sometimes it is under a farmer's field on the Romanian coast, 5.5 million years old, perfectly alive, and completely beyond our reach. Somewhere in the rock beneath southern Romania, in passages no human can safely enter, things are alive that have never seen light, never breathed uncontaminated air, and never shared the earth with us in any meaningful sense. We have not reached the end of Movile Cave not because we lack the courage or the technology, but because to go further would be to destroy the only thing that makes the going worthwhile. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.